Have you ever really stopped to think about the journey your favorite snack takes to get to you? Well, today we're cracking open the story of the humble cashew nut. And believe me, it's a journey that spans entire continents, from farms in Africa all the way to factories in Vietnam, and it reveals a global supply chain that is under some serious pressure. So first, here's a number that might just blow your mind. Over 80%, 80% of the entire world's cashews are processed in just one country, Vietnam. They are the undisputed king of the cashew industry. But that dominance, well, it's starting to look a little shaky. Because what we're seeing is that the seemingly simple nut is now stuck right in the middle of a perfect storm. It's this crazy chain reaction of global pressures. We're talking climate change, trade disputes, logistical nightmares, and it's putting the whole shebang at risk. So to really get our heads around what's going on, we're going to follow the path of just one single cashew, from the tree where it grew all the way to the port where it gets shipped out. And it's a journey that really shows you just how fragile our global food system can be. All right, so our story has to start at the source, right? On the farm. And that's where we find our first crisis, the climate. We're looking at Benin in West Africa. This region is one of the most important places on the planet for raw, unprocessed cashews. These are the nuts that eventually get sent over to Vietnam. But right here on the ground, the environment is changing, and it is changing fast. You know, the scientific studies from the area, they paint a pretty stark picture. It's just getting hotter. The last 15 years have been way warmer than before. The rain, which is the lifeblood for these crops, is becoming super unpredictable. And the forecasts? They're even more worrying. We're looking at less rain during the most important growing season and maybe a 20% jump in average temperatures by the end of the century. And look, this isn't some theoretical, far-off problem. The data shows what's happening right now. You can see it. The trend lines for the main growing regions, they're all pointing down. That means year after year, farmers are getting fewer and fewer good cashews from their land. So the climate crisis means fewer nuts are even making it off the farm. And for the ones that do, well, a whole new challenge is waiting for them right at the border. So let's get into crisis number 2, a trade situation that's putting a massive squeeze on Vietnam, the world's biggest processor. What's happening is basically a big tug of war. On one side, you have producing countries like the Ivory Coast, and they're putting up walls. They're banning the export of their best raw nuts, they're slapping on export taxes, and they're subsidizing their own processors. Then on the other side, you've got Vietnam, which desperately needs those African imports to keep its factories running. And you can really feel the frustration in the Vietnamese industry. The vice chairman of the Vietnam Cashew Association, Vinacas, he just puts it bluntly. He says this creates unfair competition. They feel like the playing field is being tilted against them. And this has some huge real-world impacts. Vietnamese processors are getting flooded with cheaper competition, and that threatens their slice of the market. It pushes down the prices for Vietnam's very own farmers, and according to the association, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs that are now at risk. But hold on, our little cashew's journey isn't over yet. It survived the unpredictable climate. It somehow navigated this trade war. It's been processed and packed up in Vietnam. Now, it just has to get across the ocean. And this brings us to the third crisis, logistics. Because even if you can grow the nuts and process them, you still have to ship them. And right now, that is a massive problem. Yeah, reports from the big Vietnamese ports describe total gridlock. There's a constant shortage of the shipping containers you need. Exporters are waiting up to 5 days just to get an empty box. And since cashews are a food commodity, sometimes the shipping lines will just bump them for higher value cargo. And all of this is happening while shipping costs are still through the roof. This just creates a devastating domino effect for the exporters. First, higher shipping costs mean higher final prices, so their cashews are less competitive. Second, the delays mean they miss those super strict delivery deadlines for supermarkets. And third, all these delays just tie up money, which drives up their warehouse costs and totally squeezes their finances. To really understand the scale of this, just look at one major exporter, SVC Group. They ship to 63 different global markets. So a delay at a port in Vietnam isn't just a local problem. It's a problem that ripples out to potentially 63 countries around the globe. So what does this all mean? What we've seen is this chain reaction of 3 separate but totally connected crises. This single cashew's journey tells the entire story. It starts on the farm, where the changing climate means a smaller harvest. Then, the nuts that make it run smack into a trade war at the border, which squeezes the processor. And finally, the finished product gets trapped at the port by a global logistics bottleneck. It just goes to show that for something as simple as a can of cashews, the journey from a tree in Africa to a snack on your shelf is incredibly complex, and right now, it is more fragile than it has ever been before. Which really leaves us with one final crucial question. When a global supply chain this complex starts to break under all this pressure, from the climate, from trade, from logistics, who's the one who ultimately pays the price? Is it the farmer, the factory worker, the business? Or is it you, the consumer?